Today I'm going to be making a beautiful tetrazzini. Wait till you see how I come up with this fabulous dish. Oh, I'm enjoying my morning coffee. Nothing like a little bit of coffee in the morning to get started. Folks, today I'm going to be making chicken tetrazzini. Now, here's the thing. I don't have a great tetrazzini recipe. I've never had a tetrazzini recipe, and that's because the couple of times that I had it when I was a kid, I wasn't so impressed with it that I wanted to produce it again. To me, it just seemed like some different way of doing spaghetti, and it just didn't appeal to me. So what I wanted to do is take this dish, elevate it a little bit, and turn it into something really spectacular. But I also wanted to make a dish that doesn't require a huge amount of pre-preparation. You know, for instance, most tetrazzini recipes require either a turkey or a chicken to be pre-cooked, and then you shred the meat and yada yada, all of that, okay? I didn't want to get into all of that. I wanted something that I could pull the meat out of the freezer at night and throw this thing together real quick for friends, family, or whatever, and it not beat me to death. There are a couple of different preparations, yes, but within that, it's not a lot of difficulty. Let me get into the background on this. I did a lot of research for you, okay? On this recipe, I didn't just jump into it because I wasn't that familiar with it. So I had to research it. And in my research, what I went for was to find the original recipe written by the original chef from the Palace Hotel in San Francisco. And that was Ernest Arbogast. Now, Ernest, he was a good chef, all right? This guy has acclaims and awards for some of the stuff he did, and what he did with oysters was spectacular. Okay, he did some really good dishes. However, it's sad to say, this particular dish was never written down, okay? It was never a part of his collection of recipes, and thus it's sort of lost in time. Nobody has any original manuscript on it, and that's just sad. However, there is enough known about it, and enough known about the way dishes were prepared in San Francisco during that time, that you can kind of put it all together. So let me kind of explain what my research led me to. There were two definitive, actually 3 definitive years for this recipe in its becoming known. Okay, first definitive year was, I believe, in 1910, and the chef at the Palace Hotel there, which was Ernest, he wanted to create a dish, and he named it after a celebrity, which is very common at that time. They would often name recipes after celebrities during the early 1900s. And in this case, it was no exception. So he named it after a performer which was staying at the hotel at the time. It was an opera star, an Italian opera star. Her name was Louisa Tetrazzini. Okay, now Louisa, staying at the hotel, knew the chef. They apparently got along pretty well. She got this recipe from him after he made it, or maybe he just provided it to her. I don't know. And maybe that's what happened to it. Maybe the original transcript or manuscript was handed to her and got lost along the way. I couldn't find it, but I did a lot of research, and I found out one of the common vegetable dishes that was being served in San Francisco at that time, and the Palace Hotel served this dish commonly, and that was almonds and mushrooms in a cream sauce. Okay? And so, boom, there's sort of the base of your tetrazzini, because tetrazzini has the almonds, it has the mushrooms, it's got the cream sauce. Okay? We have the start of a good dish here. Now, the earliest known writings about this, and the original recipe of this appears to have been turkey. There are accounts of the turkey recipe prior to the chicken. And I believe, because you got to think about, how does a commercial kitchen work? I believe it was invented for the holidays, to make a good quality dish, use up ingredients, and have something quick based upon things we already make in our own kitchen. They already made the mushrooms and almonds in the cream sauce, So to expand on that by adding some protein, you know, turkey, and then maybe some cheese, and then a little pasta, bake it all up in a dish and serve that. Okay, very easy for that kitchen to do without a lot of additional preparation. It was stuff they already had available. Makes sense, and a chef will often do that with their ingredients. They will maximize their ingredients and capitalize on what they have without having to do a bunch of extra work. This is a good example of it. Well, later on in about 1912, we start hearing accounts of the Chicken Tetrazzini, and that's all of those accounts are pretty much just localized to San Francisco and literature from there. The next records that I found on this were from New York City. Okay, let me get my notes here. There was a couple of hotels that were involved in this. First was, I think, Knickerbocker Hotel, New York City, but the one that was really named was McAlpine Hotel, and that was Louis Paquet, or I guess in the United States we would pronounce it Louis Paquet. P-A-Q-U-E-T, or Paquet, but so it's a French name. The guy was French. He was a French chef, as well as was Ernest. Ernest was a French chef in San Francisco, and Louis was a French chef there in New York City. Louisa Tetrazzini, she gave her recipe to the chef there at the McAlpine Hotel, and he then reduplicated it, and it was written about in the newspapers. And at that time, and that was I think 1920, at that time suddenly the recipe exploded in popularity and it became known throughout the United States. And then there was a couple of revivals. There was a revival in the 40s where people were doing like ham tetrazzini and stuff like that. And then another revival of it, I believe, in the 60s. So we see this recipe pop up throughout history in the United States over the last 100 years. So, pretty cool. Anyway, we're looking at an American historic recipe. Even though it was produced in Italian styling for an Italian singer by a French chef in an American hotel. What do you call it? Okay, so it's an American recipe. But in looking at the recipe and in all of the ingredients that were commonly used, I had to come up with a recipe that was going to work for me that I could provide to you. And I can think of several things that this reminds me of. It reminds me of, first of all, an Alfredo sauce. Okay, cream sauce with cheese, hey, not a hard thing. Okay, so that part's easy. The mushrooms and almonds in a cream sauce kind of thing. Boom, plays right into that. It's just about the protein. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some chicken that's been cut up, some white meat, and I'm going to be cooking that with the mushrooms and almonds. We're going to use a little white wine. And folks, you know, I had to think about how am I going to flavor this? So let's think back to the original. What would a French chef use? For instance, an herb or a spice. What would he use? He wouldn't want too much. He'd keep it simple because he's not trying to overwork this recipe, remember. He's trying to keep it simple, make it easy for that holiday push, get rid of those ingredients that are we made too much of, and then also give it a unique kick. What would he use? I'm thinking a French chef would probably pull out a little tarragon. And of course some garlic would work well with it. I honestly believe that had Louis not done it that way, Ernest likely would have done it that way. One of the two of them probably would have at some point used some tarragon in this recipe. So that's the way I'm going to do mine. Now folks, I've come up with a good recipe here, but I've never made it. So this is what I do sometimes. Remember, it's recipe development. And we get to develop it together. I'm going to do it on camera with you watching. This is Chicken Tetrazzini. Let's get at it. Come on. Today, our ingredients for this beautiful chicken tetrazzini is going to be, of course, some diced up chicken. Go ahead and just cut up some chicken. I used boneless, skinless chicken breasts for this. I also have some almonds, white button cap mushrooms that I have quartered, and back here is some Parmesan cheese. I've shredded that out. I'll be using olive oil, black pepper, and salt. I have fettuccine here. I've decided to do this instead of the spaghetti because I think it just sort of suits the dish better. We're going to be using some tarragon, garlic, butter, heavy cream, and a little bit of white wine. You want a nice dry white wine for that. Folks, I'm going to get busy combining this into a fabulous dish. Now let's get started. Folks, the dish I have chosen to cook this up in is right here. These little boats are just perfect for this dish. The reason I'm doing it this way instead of using a large casserole dish is because if this was being served in a restaurant, which is where it was invented, it would have been done in individual serving dishes just like this. So I want to go with something that is a little more like what it would have been in a restaurant. They wouldn't have just slopped it onto a plate from a large dish. It would have been prepared neat and served well, especially in a fine restaurant. So folks, that's the dish I recommend, or some other form of small dish where you can bake individual portions. Now folks, I have some water heating right here on this burner. I'm going to cover that as it comes up in temperature. I can lower the flame a little bit with it covered too. Now, I can turn my attention right over here, and I'm going to be making this Alfredo sauce. That's the first thing up because it can be made, set aside as we're cooking the rest of the ingredients. For this, I'm going to start with my butter. Let's just put some butter in there. Get a flame up under there. There we go. I'll lower that to about a medium to medium low flame. There we are. Good way to start this. Now, when you're going to be flavoring an Alfredo with garlic, here's what I recommend doing. I recommend keeping it simple when you're going to be flavoring an Alfredo sauce with garlic. All you have to do is take your cloves, gently crush them. Be careful when using a knife for this, okay? Now that they're crushed, I can put these right in the pan, allow that butter to absorb the oils from the garlic, and then once I've got the garlic, or the butter I should say, flavored with my garlic, I can pull that garlic back out, put my cream in there, and I'm up and running. There we go. Just starting to cook that garlic off. And this doesn't take long, okay? So don't you don't have to worry about being in a rush, but at the same time, we don't want to overcook our butter. We don't want to brown it. We're just looking to flavor it. So what I'm looking for here is I want to see this garlic cook for just a moment. I want to see a little sizzling action. I want to see the butter turn color slightly, and that way I'm going to get a very special flavor from this. The garlic is releasing its oil right now. It's releasing it into that butter, flavoring that butter, and as a result, we're going to end up with a very special sauce. This is the best way to get garlic flavor in an Alfredo sauce, guys, and you don't have to have any little bits or pieces of garlic left over after the fact. Now we're getting beautiful garlic release, so you get that flavor that's just rolling out into that butter. Now we see a little change in the color of our butter, exactly what I'm looking for. So I'm simply going to take that garlic out of there now. There we go. Garlic is removed. Now let's go ahead and get our cream in. And there you can see the color of that butter and what we did to it. It's beautiful. Don't worry, that'll mix right into that cream. At the moment, I have this over a medium-low heat, and that's a good temperature to do this at. So keep yours down. And as soon as this starts steaming, I'm going to start adding my cheese in there. And folks, this does not take long. I'm actually, as I'm filming this, I'm doing this in a single shot.
And I generally don't like long clips. But in this one, it's only going to be a few minutes long because that's really all it takes to get this started up. I'm starting to see some light wisps of steam coming up off of this, very lightly. So what I want to do is just begin gently sprinkling in the cheese and give it a stir. Don't get in a rush about this. Don't put all of the cheese that you want to melt in there at once. You got to do it gradually, okay? Adding in a little bit at a time, let it melt, and once it melts, add in some more. At the same time, we don't want this coming to a boil either. So you see I'm getting a lot of steam. I'm lowering my heat just a little bit. There we go. I've got it on a low flame now. You see how that cheese is melting off, and as it does that, it's mixing in with that cream. And that's all there is to it. If you want to know how to make an Alfredo, you've just learned it right there. Now most of that cheese is melted, so I can now take another small handful. I'm going to drip it down in there. Yeah. Now something that needs to be mentioned, folks, when you're making an Alfredo sauce, you may notice that it has a slightly gritty quality to it. If your Alfredo sauce has a slightly gritty quality, that means that you used a very high quality cheese, because good quality Parmesan cheese forms small crystals in the cheese. That's that little crunchy bits that you'll sometimes notice, especially closer to the outer part of the cheese, the rind. That can, like I said, leave something of a grainy quality to your sauce. Give it some time, it'll eventually dissipate, but you need to be patient about that, okay? Don't get in a big rush with it. Okay, I've still been stirring this for about another 3, maybe 4 minutes now, and if you'll notice, all the cheese, for the most part, there's a little bit of stringiness on the bottom of my whisk, but the majority of it is melted in, and I'm just going to finish it up now. But whenever we're doing something like this, we need to look at quality and consistency, okay? So let's look at this sauce. There's those little specks I was telling you about. Let's taste it. The flavor is fantastic. Mouthfeel is good. Got good texture. I think we have a beautiful sauce here. And I do believe it's just about ready to go. I think another minute, when I stop getting these little strings, I'm there. Keep my heat low. In fact, I just went ahead and turned off the heat to it, and that way the residual heat will finish doing the rest at this point. Now that I have my pasta all drained off, I'm going to hit it with a little olive oil. Now, good for flavor, yes. Also, it keeps that pasta from sticking together, folks. That's the magic secret that restaurants use. Right there, because you'll know that they don't try to get rid of the starch when dealing with pasta. They just want to keep it all together. Now, folks, let's test. See that? See how fast that water cooked off? It ain't hot enough. If it cooks off fast like that, the skillet needs to heat up more. I should be able to throw water into that pan and it'll bead up and skate around in there, and that's what I'm looking for. Okay, a little more water. See how it's beginning to skate, but it's still sizzling off pretty fast. Okay, I'm going to heat it just a little bit more, and then I'm going to start my cooking. Now, folks, I use this as a way of knowing when the pan is at the right temperature to cook in. And I do this every time, and that way it ensures me consistency and quality in the food that I cook. Now, why is it important that you do this? Well, if you just put oil in there and throw the ingredients in there and heat the thing up, a lot of times your ingredients stick to the pan. Things don't really work out well. But if you preheat the pan first, then put the oil in after it's preheated, not during, then you get better lubricating qualities from the oil. The food cooks up and caramelizes on the outside better, and you just get better, faster, more quality cooking. And as I said, there's also consistency in what you're doing. So what I do is I preheat that pan. You just preheat it dry.
Now there's one other thing that needs to be mentioned. If you're using this method where you throw water in there to test it, make sure that before you put oil in that pan, that you take a towel and remove any of the water that could be in there, or the minute you put oil in there, you're going to have a really bad situation on your hands, okay? Another test. Ooh, looky there. It's almost there. But that's what we're looking for. That water is skating around, folks. Look at that. Isn't that cool? This is what they call Leidenfrost effect, okay? And a scientist named Leidenfrost learned that when the pan gets hot enough, a vapor barrier forms between the water and the pan, preventing the water from instantly sizzling off. All right, isn't that neat? Let me get all that out of there. Let's get some oil in there, and our pan is ready to cook. You notice I just get the oil worked around, and that's fine. From there, we put in our ingredients. Now, at first, you may get a little sticking. Don't worry about that, okay? Let it. It won't hurt a thing. Once that chicken cooks a little bit and caramelizes, it will then release. It looks kind of like stir frying, doesn't it? See how easy it releases? At first it was sticking, but once it cooks enough, it'll actually release. Now, while that's cooking, let's go ahead and add in, there we go, get our mushrooms in there. Now, folks, something I have to say, mushrooms, they're like little sponges. They just soak stuff up. So when you're frying it, it's going to soak up all of that oil. Have a little extra oil handy for when you put those mushrooms in there, because they're going to need it. And they are going to eat it up. They'll just gobble it right out of your pan. Now, another thing I want to mention, if and when, and it does happen, if you have things fly out of your pan like this, don't throw it back in. Throw it away, please. There's nothing that will turn your guests off more than seeing you pick food up off of the counter or stove or floor or whatever after it has come out of the pan. They don't want to see that. They want to see that go in the trash, and it makes them feel good if you do that. So, do what's best for everybody, yourself, your guests, and throw that away. My chicken has almost hit the point where it's fully cooked, and when I say fully cooked, it's just simply no longer pink in the middle. I could stop right here, and that's fine. However, I need to get a little more done, and that's going to be adding these nuts, adding in the tarragon, so I'm going to sprinkle that across. There we go. And get my wine in there. All right. And I have this on a high heat. Oh my goodness, the odor, it is absolutely fabulous. Bring that back up in temperature. We're going to cook it down just a little bit. That's beautiful looking, isn't it? Oh yes. Between the smell of the almonds and the tarragon, oh yeah, that is just fabulous. All right. Now, most of the liquid has now cooked out. All right? And that only took about 2 extra minutes. So it's not like I've got a bunch of overcooked anything here. In fact, everything is absolutely where I believe it needs to be, okay? So at this point, I'm ready to start mixing in my cream sauce. To do that, I'm going to turn off heat to this pan. At this point, everything is fully cooked. The only thing we need the oven for is going to be for browning off the cheese that we put over the top. There we go. Alfredo. In there you go. There we go. All right. So now I have something that is absolutely stellar. Now, the first thing that's happening right now is those mushrooms. Remember I told you before they're like little sponges? They're busy soaking up some of the moisture in this cream sauce. And in a minute, that pasta is going to soak up a little bit more. Next thing I need to do is to get the dishes that I'm going to cook this up in ready and on a sheet pan. And I'm going to do that to make them easier to handle. Now folks, I have all of my ingredients prepared and ready to go. Right here, I have this beautiful tetrazzini ready to go. I have my noodles in the pot over here. I've just got to put some noodles in each dishes, and then I'm going to top it with the sauce and all the goodies that come with it. And then over the top of that, we're going to hit it with some cheese and put it in the oven at 350 degrees. The amount of time it takes is the amount of time it takes to melt the cheese, brown it lightly, and it is ready to eat. The only reason it has to be in the oven, folks, is to brown the cheese. It's just that simple. All right, all of my ingredients ready to go. Time for some assembly. I'm going to start by taking some of my pasta and lining the bottom of each of my dishes. There we go. We have these all lined out now. We need to put goodies on top. I'm going to do it like this, just to reduce any possibility of a big old mess. If you notice, I'm trying to get plenty of the sauce in each spoonful. All right. Now, of course, the reason for the pan is obvious. I've already dripped onto the pan, and it just helps to make things a little neater when you're working with stuff like this. All right, our cheese right up over the top. Didn't that work out nice? We used all of our ingredients. I'm just going to try to clean up a little of my cheese mess here. Everything is ready for the oven. Time to go on in. Oh yeah. Now what I started with today on all of my ingredients, we're going to begin right here. This is 3 tablespoons of butter, 1.5 cups of heavy cream, 1 teaspoon of tarragon, 2 cloves of garlic. I started with 1/2 pound of fettuccine. This is 14 ounces of diced chicken. You could use 14 ounces to a pound, that's 16 ounces. This is 1/3 of a cup of white wine. Back here we have about 6 ounces of white button cap mushrooms that have been quartered. 3/4 of a cup of almonds that have been broken. 8 ounces of Parmesan cheese. Now you want to use fresh Parm that you can shred out so it'll melt better. 1 teaspoon of salt, 1 teaspoon of black pepper, and of course olive oil is just as needed. The tetrazzini is out of the oven and it is absolutely beautiful. I'm really looking forward to this. I have been for quite some time now. Got nuts, mushroom, chicken. This is really rich. This is delicious. Folks, this one's a winner. It's a keeper. I hope you enjoy your tetrazzini. I'm going to enjoy this one. It tastes great. Do me a favor, take a look at my channel. First of all, a lot of recipes there. Okay, I'm just hit my 5th season. Things are starting to move forward. It looks like within this year I should hit 10,000 subscribers. Thank you guys, I really appreciate you. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And also take a look in the links in my description box. You're going to see some other links there like S.A.Trotter Arts, and that's S.A.Trotter.com. If you would, take a look at that. That is my website. That's where I sell my stuff. That's where I sell my services. If you're interested in photographic services, you'll find it there. And also, if you like what I produce, you can purchase it there as well. Thank you for looking. Thank you for spending your time watching Texas Cooking Today. And folks, have a good day. Bye-bye.